What is up, guys? Ivan here with getivan.com, and in this video we are going to be setting up SEO hosting using the Google Cloud Platform. So go ahead and do a Google search for Google Cloud Platform or GCP and sign up. And first thing you're going to want to do is click on this menu icon, this navigation menu, go to billing, provide a credit card, and make sure that you upgrade your account. Now, when you do that, you should see an icon up here somewhere that says, upgrade from free trial to pro or whatever. And that will, even though you're upgrading, they will still transfer your trial credits into your account. So it's kind of a long explanation. If you just use the free trial, you can do a number of things, but you might be hindered from certain special features. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell everybody to go ahead and upgrade your account. And that way, if you do anything that incurs a charge, then you'll be covered. But you will still have free trial credits if you're new to this platform. Okay, so please go ahead and do that. And that way you don't hit any snags along the way. Now, once you've dealt with billing and you've upgraded the account properly, you're going to want to go into I am an admin and go to the settings tab and name your organization. This is something that a lot of clients do not do, even though I tell them to do this, but please do this so that you can stay organized with your projects. So go to settings, name your organization. Once you do that, up here at the top on this drop down, I'm not going to click it because I don't want to open my organization and show all my projects. But you're going to click on this and you're going to create, from this menu, you can create a new project. So go ahead, once you've added your billing and named your organization, go ahead and create your first project and label it something like SEO hosting, okay? So before we get started, I'll show you under my organization tab, under identity and organization, you can actually delegate the setup of your organization to someone in your company if you want to do that. And I just wanted to show you all briefly that I've been in Google Cloud for about 2 years. So I've been doing this for a little bit. I've done a variety of things in Google Cloud. I'm certainly not an expert server management type of person. I'm really just coming from a marketing background and web design background. So everything that I show you is simple enough that I think pretty much anybody can do it. So let's dive right in. When you are looking at the menu here, a lot of what you need to do is going to be in Compute Engine VM instances. Sometimes you'll be in disks, and in some cases, you may need to go to committed use discounts. And then, oopsie, I did not mean to click that. You will also be using VPC Network, external IP addresses, and also network services, Cloud DNS. Okay, so if you're new to the interface, don't be intimidated. Just bookmark some of these pages as we go through them, and it will be really easy to deal with. You can create a bookmark like mine up here for Google, and then with this tab, I can get to all kinds of Google services just through a bookmark. Okay, excuse me. So what we're basically going to be doing is using marketplace images provided by various people, various companies, and in some cases Google themselves, to create virtual machines that already have software preloaded on them. So I've created a special project called Sandbox so that when I'm finished with it, I can essentially delete the entire project and I won't incur any charges. This is one of the beauties of the cloud. They charge by the hour or the minute or whatever, some smaller increment of time. And so I can create a bunch of stuff and only be charged, pennies or very small amount of money for the time that I have it created. And that way I can demo it to you guys. And when I'm finished, I'm not making here, let me commit to, $30 a month or $80 a month or whatever for all these different things. It's not that complicated. Once you get set up in GCP, you can you can create all kinds of things for testing purposes, and then you can destroy them really easily. Okay. And in some cases, you can turn instances off and then not be charged. And another thing is you can edit a virtual machine. You can turn a virtual machine off, edit it, and you can upgrade it or downgrade it. So another beauty of the cloud, it's really convenient for managing your own resources. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to click on this menu and I'm going to open up the marketplace. And in this example, I'm going to be creating independent WordPress virtual machines. So let's type in WordPress. Now you can do this with a variety of these pre-built installs. The ones I recommend, I've definitely tested this one from LiteSpeed. Some of you may recognize this brand name. These guys make a popular caching plugin for WordPress, and their pre-built marketplace server image, I guess you could say, is really, really awesome. It's something that I recently switched some of my major stuff to, and I've really been enjoying digging into it. Then you've also got some other ones. Now, look out for Google Click to Deploy. I believe that Google provides that. So if you decide you don't want to use LiteSpeed, you can also you don't want to use Google Kubernetes apps. That's a much more powerful virtual machine type of a setup. You would want to use, let's see, something like this. Or, well, that's two containers. You don't want to do containers. You want to do virtual machines. So WordPress, Google Click to Deploy virtual machines. So if you don't want to use the LiteSpeed deployment, you can use this one that Google provides. And there are differences. You know, I noticed when they're compared, Google likes to use a certain Linux operating system, and LiteSpeed likes to use another. And I'll go ahead and show you guys the differences real quick, and then you can make your own decision. What's this here? Oh, okay. So for Google, you'll notice they use Debian 9, and they use all these kinds of programs on their server. And if you take a look at some of the versions, some of them are going to be lower, most likely, than what LiteSpeed puts out. I'm not sure. Let's see when it was last updated. Last updated today. Oh, wow. So they're on top of that image. And then over here with LiteSpeed, they use Ubuntu 18.0, and then they use a little bit newer version of PHP, and they use a different database management type of thing. I've done testing with this one primarily, and I haven't had any issues. I migrated some stuff from other server sets, and I have had no issues. So what I basically did was I made a WordPress side backup of some sites, and then I migrated them into the new infrastructure, and like I said, no problems. So we're going to be using this for the sake of this example. And all you have to do is, you obviously have to make sure you know the right project. Click on Launch on Compute Engine. Now, if you're doing a bunch, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you've got a site that's really important to you, then I would recommend doing it on an SSD drive. But for a lot of my mini site deployments, I don't have a problem with doing standard persistent disk, and my priority is keeping WordPress site backups. And then if there's a problem with the server that for some reason I can't fix, then all that I really have to do is kill the entire virtual machine and redeploy a new virtual machine, and then restore the backup of the WordPress site to the VM. Okay. So it doesn't really matter. Like, I like to do US Central. This does matter if you're going to do committed use discounts, like if you want to pay less over time. But I can explain that at the end here. So I'll just let this deployment name stay there since I'm not going to keep all this. So what you want to do for the machine type is, now keep in mind, you do get a free amount of usage. It's like 700 something hours. You see, look at this, 730 hours per month on, let's see, this machine type, micro, one shared, and then about half a gig of memory. So the goal is you want to set up your WordPress instance, and then you can down in higher hardware, and then you can downgrade the hardware when you're done doing a lot of bulk processing. So this particular machine type gets a free amount of usage every month. So for your clients, for example, you could set them up on Google Cloud and then build out their site and restore the backup and then downgrade the VM to this level. And then essentially your client would be paid nothing every month for web hosting. So that's kind of a cool little method. For your stuff, you'd only get one free thing per month, and then you'd have to pay $5 a month for each little virtual machine instance. And you can't get a committed use discount on anything lower than, I believe, let's see, 1 vCPU. I think it's this right here. You can't get anything lower than about this for committed use discount, because the shared vCPU they don't offer committed use discount for these machine types. These are like archetypes, but anything that is above a shared, so it's one dedicated vCPU, then you can get a committed use discount. So it's obviously it's more expensive. So if we were to up this to 1 vCPU and 3.75 gigs of RAM, then you see it's about 20 something bucks a month. But with a committed use discount, if you make a commitment, you can essentially cut that price in half. There's a sustained use discount, but that's already applied. That's a whole other story. Anyways, what we're trying to do here, though, is we're trying to be on a shared vCPU. And why can't we do this here? Oh, I see, it's already selected. So you want to make it like this: shared vCPU and 1.7 gigs of RAM, and that way you won't have any problems building pages and running a bunch of processes and stuff like that. Let's see, what's the basic? Okay. Yeah, small. So it's this profile right here: small, 1 shared vCPU. Okay. Now you can do, like I was saying earlier, you can do an SSD drive if your site is more important to you or whatever, and you're doing a lot of different bulk processing. But I recommend for most of your mini sites, for SEO hosting purposes, just do standard persistent disk. It's a lot cheaper. You see this here, standard persistent 10 gigs for 50 cents a month, and then SSD is like 3 times that amount. So I recommend doing standard persistent, and you don't necessarily need 10 gigs of space. You probably only need probably 5. Oh, it can't be less than 10. Oh shoot, I didn't even know that. Well, I guess you're doing 10. All right, so 10, and then let's see here, network. You don't really need to mess with any of this. This IP here, this will be changed after we do this. So all this stuff should be default. More IP forwarding should be on, so that's all default. So essentially, you're naming your instance, you're setting the zone, and this is US Central, and then you're setting the machine type: small, 1 shared vCPU, 1.7 gigs of memory, standard persistent disk at 10 gigs, and the rest should be default. And then you deploy, and it'll take a second to deploy. So I'll pause it for just a moment while that happens. Okay, so once you get to this screen, you'll see a lot of this stuff pending. Just give it a minute to deploy that instance. And then over here, excuse me, you'll see a bunch of things that are relevant. You can read through some of the stuff if you get stuck, but I'll just go ahead and save you the time and show you. Basically, it deploys it onto an IP address. And so technically, you could use this system for staging websites, and you could just build a website on an IP without even assigning a domain. And then you could back up the WordPress site and restore it to your client site. So that's one thing you could do with this system. Before I move on, I'm actually going to make the IP static, and I'm going to assign a domain to it just to show you guys that process. So I'm going down here to VPC Network external IP addresses. And it is taking forever. So you'll see this IP that I created here is ephemeral. All I have to do to make it static is click that drop down and then select static. And then it asks me to name it. And I'll name this sandbox IP1 and reserve. And it'll take a moment. And oh, that's already done. So that IP that was initially ephemeral for that VM is now static. And if you need to do that, you need to make it static if you're going to be doing SEO hosting on WordPress sites, because in the DNS records you have to do an A record assigning the domain name to an IP. So if the IP, if it's ephemeral, and you shut the server down and you reboot it, and then it'll switch to a different IP, and then your site will be broken. So that doesn't really matter if you're just accessing the site through the IP for staging purposes or whatever. But if you want something to live there, then if you want to have a domain name associated with it, then you're going to have to make sure that this IP is set to static. Okay. So now that it's static, I can copy this. And I'm going to go ahead and go to, for some reason it's selecting, let's go to Compute Engine VM instances. And this is where we will see that virtual machine that the deployment created. So there it is right there. And from this area, you can come here and stop the VM if you need to edit it and upgrade the hardware or downgrade the hardware. And you can also do this drop down to do a variety of things. I don't typically, I usually connect to SSH through the Google tool, but you can get other information to connect to SSH through other means. If you're not familiar, SSH is basically a command prompt type of thing for accessing your Linux server that the WordPress site is built on. And sometimes you might need to access that, but basically once you get it set up, you don't really need to mess with anything, Okay, so what are we doing? Oh, assigning, so DNS records. So let's go ahead and open our navigation menu. In another tab, I'm going to open Network Services Cloud DNS. And I'm doing it from here to show you guys, and also because my bookmarks are associated with a specific project. Okay, so once this opens, I'm going to add one of these domain names, and then I'm going to change the name servers over here on name silo. Oh, that logged me out. Give me a minute. Okay, so for the sake of this example, I'm going to be showing you how to set these name servers for m4.click. This is one of my just kind of random domains that I have in my name silo account. And I reserved some really simple chips on .click like this for staging purposes. And so in my one of my other hosting projects, I have one of these chip domains that acts as a template, and then I back up that template and I restore it over to another staging site, and then in that staging site, I restore the template and I configure the template for client websites, and then I back up that template or that environment, and then I give it to the client, or I go to the client's actual WordPress site and I restore the template or whatever. Sometimes I need to take this, clone the client site, and then restore it over in one of the staging areas. And so you can do this exact same thing for your own mini sites, staging area, deployment area, and so on and so forth. Okay. So m4.click, we need to go to this area. I'm going to create a zone, public. I'm going to call the zone m4.click. Begin with a letter that only contain lowercase letters, digits, or dashes. Oh, okay. Let's do m4 dash click. And then m4 dot click will be the DNS name. And we're going to leave this off. Description, create. So it automatically creates it with the name servers and SOA record. And so I'm just need to grab one of these and make sure you have the period there, or you might get some errors thrown. And come over here, paste this in, paste this in, paste this in, paste this in, and then just change, let's see, A234. So 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to submit this. Give me one moment. Okay, so I just finished that, but make sure that you don't, well, I guess it depends on your domain name registrar. I got an error thrown and I deleted the periods at the end, and then it said, okay, now it's cool. Sometimes in some places you have to put the period at the end, and some places don't want you to put the period at the end. So just, if you get an error, just try it both ways depending on your registrar. Okay, so that should be set. The name servers are pointed here, and now I'm going to add a record for this external IP. So I went over here to the compute engine VM instances, and I copied this external IP that we made static earlier. And I'm not going to put anything here because I want the root to be pointed here. And we're going to do an A record. We're going to do this for 5 seconds, and we're going to change it in just a second. Paste the IP4 address here and create. So now it's pointed there. I'm going to wait a second. And now we can go and do the initial setup for the domain. So that might seem a little bit complicated. I know that a lot of folks are used to cPanel. And in cPanel, you can add your new domain and then go in. You might do your redirects and your WordPress site setup, and maybe change the HD access for SSL redirects. And so there's always going to be a little bit of setup, even if you're on cPanel. The beauty of this is that you're pointing a new domain, you're setting the record, which you already have to do with cPanel, right? And then you're setting the A record. And from there, it's pretty much the same. So most of the stuff, like I have, servers with cPanel, and I have stuff like this that's self-managed that doesn't. And once something is set up, even on cPanel, it's not like you're really going back there and messing with anything besides the name servers from that point on. So if you know how to use Google Cloud DNS, or not name servers, besides the DNS records, I meant to say, if you know how to go to Google Cloud DNS, then it's not a problem. It basically works the same as other places. So let's change this record here to 5 hours. Not sure if that's even necessary, but sometimes it doesn't refresh really quickly, so I kind of do that by habit. Okay, let's go over to that deployment manager. Now, if you closed this window by accident earlier, you can do this drop down, and you can go down to deployment manager somewhere in this world, this big list of things. Let me see. Oh, here it is. Under Tools, Deployment Manager, Deployments. And so if you ever wanted to delete this deployment, all you have to do is go to the Deployment Manager, and you can delete the deployment, and that will destroy everything that the deployment created, including the virtual machine and just everything in this area here. Okay. So let's refresh this page. And then we're going to connect to SSH. So let's you don't want to do this because this is WordPress admin. You just want to click this right here, SSH. You can do this from Compute Engine also. I just wanted to do it from here. There are other things that you can access in this server. You just have to read some of this documentation. So this is some instructions for doing that. If you click on this right here, then there's like a server management portal, but it's not like cPanel. It's for more technical server management. So I'm really kind of just skipping all this other stuff. Okay, let me grab this SSH here. And so you see here, from the beginning, it asks you for the domain you want to associate with the server. You can take the time to read all this stuff. If you're using a TLD, a top-level domain, you can include the subdomain www before that. So I'm not sure what all is considered a TLD, .com, I'm assuming .net, .org and things like that. I'm using a GTLD, which .click in this case, so I'm not going to use the www. If you try to put the www before a GTLD, then the whole process will fail. So be mindful of the domain you're using. In this case, I'm doing m4.click. Enter. Is this the one you want to use? Yes, it is. And domain has been added to the listener. Do you want to issue a Let's Encrypt certificate? So this is SSL, really easy, right? Yes, I do. And it passed, so it's good to go. I'm going to put my email in and hit enter. And is this correct? Yes, that is correct. And now it's rolling through all this stuff. Cleaning up challenges. Do you wish to force HTTPS rewrite rule for this domain? Why, yes, I do. Now, if this causes problems with your site, all you need to do is go into the .ht access file and correct it. Now, because there's no interface and you're not using cPanel, you're not going to be able to use File Manager for cPanel, but you can still use an FTP manager. So for some of you folks who are used to using FileZilla and stuff like that, this method is no problem, you know. Okay, do you wish to update the system which include the web server? Yes, I suppose so. I don't know anything about it, but so I've been selecting yes every time, and I'll pause the video while this works. It takes a few minutes. Okay, it's finished, and it obviously, you see it says system up to date, and now it's looking at your typical SSH area. So I'm just going to go ahead and type exit, and if we take a look at m4.click, it should bring us up to the configuration of the WordPress install. So I'm just going to go through this, and I'm going to copy this for a moment. Site title under construction, info admin, email admin.com, and install. All right, let me log in. Wow, did it already save? Okay. Let me see if there's anything. And then all this stuff, of course, at this point is up to you. I do recommend on this server, since it's a LiteSpeed server, I recommend going ahead and using Lightspeed Cache. I mean, I think it's logical to assume that the server has been configured to work really well with their caching plugin. And I did notice, see, before I was using Auto Optimize and Critical CSS and some other thing, And I was on Plesk server on one of my bigger groupings and paying all kinds of money every month for all kinds of different things. And when I switched it to this, there was a noticeable difference in the load speed of my site. And when I checked it in some of the Pingdom and GT metrics and page speed insights and all that business, then it had better scores. So I haven't really messed with it much since then. But yeah, from this point, you can use something like all-in-one WP migration here to restore a backup of your site or a template like I was telling you about earlier. And when you do that, then you'll have those other logins. And so, but yeah, I mean, pretty easy. You see we're under HTTPS here. And I won't go into, doing mini sites or anything, of course, but that's basically the process. And, I did a lot of talking here, but without all my talking, you can do this pretty quickly. I mean, even let's see how much in this video so far. So 30 minutes. So I think you could probably do this kind of thing for one little site in under 15 minutes or so. And the cool thing is that you can just keep going to the marketplace. Now, before I forget, you want to kind of do your setup, do all the building that you need to do, and then you can come in and here, let me close this. Let me close these two. You can come in to the virtual machine. You can stop it. It'll say, hey, if this could cause problems if it doesn't stop in a short period of time. So that's fine with me. And you can go in and you can edit it, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute here. But the idea is, again, you go to the menu and you go to marketplace, and you keep adding these LiteSpeed little sites, on these little LiteSpeed servers. And you can change the external IP to something static. And now the way that works is Google doesn't charge you for IPv4 addresses if they're in use by a virtual machine. So if it's not assigned to a virtual machine, it'll be considered reserved or whatever, or something like that, or unused or whatever, and then they'll charge you for it. And I did the math, and it's something like $7.50 a month if it's not assigned to a machine. But I tested it earlier. Excuse me. And if it's assigned to a machine, even if the machine is turned off, it's still considered, reserved by that machine. And so it won't charge you for the IP address, the static IP address. You'll just be paying for the virtual machine. Even if the machine is turned off, they won't charge you, to my knowledge. I did a test earlier, turned off the machine. You can go into SSH, excuse me. Once this is done, the server's turned off, darn it. Well, I'll turn this back on in a second and I'll show you. Actually, you know what? It's in Google Cloud. Let me see if I can activate this cloud shell here. I don't think you do it in SSH. You do it in, well, that'll reveal. You can do it in the cloud shell, but basically, I think you can put a command like free space -m, and it'll tell you how much. Or wait, no, that's free memory. What am I thinking? There's a command. If you do a Google search on it, there's a command. Actually, I have a bookmark here. Where is this bookmark? Google Cloud pricing, network pricing. Here it is. I'll show you in this. While that's loading, we'll take a look here. If you click on this virtual machine, I'll show you how you can edit it to increase or decrease the hardware. You just click this. Once the machine is turned off, you can click this edit button up here, and you'll have the ability to edit the hardware on the machine. And so after you have added a bunch of pages and plugins and you've configured your site the way you want it, you can click here and you can downgrade it to F1 micro. And this is the machine type that gets like 700 something hours of free use every month. You get that many hours of free use for one of these machine types. And the cost is only on sustained use. I think it's like $5.50, so $5.50 a month or something like. Now that's it's somewhere in the vicinity of $6 a month, including the hard drive. So if you had 10 little microsites, that'd cost you like $60 a month. But the beauty is, it's your own self-managed SEO hosting on your own static IPs. So then each of those little mini sites has their own IP, and you don't have to jack around with some other expensive environment. And we'll take a look at that here in just a minute, some of the prices out there. So under network pricing in the Google documentation, you can scroll to the bottom here, and you'll see it says static IP address assigned but unused, assigned and in use, no charge. So I tested it and it said it was in use. I think in use means it's not that it's well, that's actually kind of a question for me now, because I tested it when something was turned off and it didn't call, it said it was in use. You see this here? If you do this command, where is this command? Right here, gcloud compute addresses list request. If you do that in Google Cloud Shell, I guess, you might be able to do that in SSH. But otherwise, you click up here on Activate Cloud Shell, and then you type this in. I don't want it to show all of my project stuff, so I'm not going to do it right now. But it'll tell you if it's in use or it's reserved. I'm pretty sure that, well, now that kind of has me questioning myself. Anyways, now you can look at this and you can test it yourself. If you have a mini site that you intend on actually using, then you can obviously assign a static IP address and not pay anything. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. But be aware that you will be charged if it's just sitting there and it's not being used. Okay, moving on here, let's take a look at the edit here. I already explained the editing process. I do recommend that while you're in here, you turn on allow traffic. I think that's probably already turned on. I remember seeing that, or should already be turned. Obviously, people can visit it, but there's something else here that needed to be turned on. Enable connecting to serial ports. This should be set. Migrate VM instance recommended. So if that hardware is, they're doing maintenance on the hardware. Automatic restarts turned on. That should be default. And something involved with the disk. The disk should be, where's the disk? So you see here, when deleting instance, delete disk. So keep in mind that if the instance is deleted, then the disk will be deleted also. So what you can do is you can actually have this as keep disk, and you can just be paying for the site as the site is on the hard drive, right? And then you can just be paying 50 cents a month for that. And then if you wanted to assign it somewhere later, that for some reason you wanted to delete your virtual machine, then you can do that. I don't recommend doing that, because then you'd have to be aware of the virtual machine settings and all that business. But anywho, moving on here, and you see there's a certain amount of API access for stack driver and all this kind of business. So just let the deployment deal with it. But anyways, when we take a look at a Google search of SEO hosting services, you can take a look at some of the prices out there. So let's just see who's ranking here. Multiple IP provider. Golly. No, this is not what I was looking for. Let's see what this site says. C-Class USA. See, they're charging a certain amount per IP, I guess, per month, but it's not really telling us how much the hosting is. Let's take a look. Three IP addresses, 12 gigs disk space, 120 gigs bandwidth per IP price. Okay, monthly price. So 3 IPs with this service is $14 a month. So let's look at, oh geez, 110. Wow. So 10 IPs would be about $50 a month. But you have a limited amount of disk space and bandwidth and computational capabilities. And so that's really kind of a similar price. But you just got to remember also that you're not having to deal with any limitations necessarily. You're not having to deal with however they've set things up on server side. You know, each instance getting its own resources. You know, obviously you got their shared vCPU, but its own dedicated amount of RAM, right? It's a lot better. I've used SEO hosting in the past and been very, very, very frustrated with it because a lot of the ways that it seems to be done is they're not really dedicated IP addresses, if that makes any sense. They are done in such a way that to make it easy for people to manage that stuff through cPanel and what have you. It can be glitchy basically, and I'm making a lot of blanket statements about a lot of services that I don't know anything about. So there's obviously you're probably going to find some decent SEO hosting services out there, but I like this method because it's on demand. If I don't want to use something, I can just turn it off, you know. Or if I want to experiment, or if I want to increase the amount of server resources that I'm using temporarily, like if I have a really big job that I need to process for creating a bunch of mass posts or something like that, I can just come into the server and I can just up it to whatever I want, you know? And if you're, I mean, you can up your stuff all the way to, you know, some hardcore VPS type of stuff like this. And you can run that if you want to for an hour and pay a really small amount of money and then come in and turn it off and go back all the way back down to this right here. So that's pretty much it. I don't think I have anything else to share. To recap, basically, you're creating a GCP account. You're going into the navigation menu. And oopsie, you're going to Marketplace. You're launching a deployment from Lightspeed server company or whatever for WordPress, letting that build. Then you're going in and to your DNS area, and you are grabbing those name servers for a domain that you want to point to Google DNS, and you're pointing. You're going to go over to your domain registrar, point that domain to Google DNS. Then you're going to point that domain with an A record to the IP address. Oh, and of course, forgot, you got to go to you got to go to VPC Network, external IPs, make that ephemeral IP static. Then you're pointing, then you're pointing your domain name to your static IP, and then under Deployment Manager, or even here, you can click on SSH, and Lightspeed has set it up so that you can do the setup really quickly from SSH. Tell them what domain name you're assigning to that server, and tell them that you want to do the Let's Encrypt thing for the SSL certificate and put your email and all that business and upgrade the server. And then you just go to your domain name, set up the WordPress site, and restore a backup of a template that you're building in or whatever. And so you can do this, every 15 or 30 minutes, you can build mini sites right here in GCP. And for anything that you don't want to use, you can just come over here and stop the instance and rethink your strategies and all this business. But that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later. If you need any consultation on this or need any extra help, don't hesitate to go to getivan.com and to contact me. Fill out the contact form. Let me know if there's anything you need help with. If you want me to just come in and set up your stuff for you, we can talk about prices. Typically at the low end, I'll do stuff like this for $125. And or if you just have questions, I have a service where you can pay to just ask questions about processes, and I charge a certain amount for questions. And basically, if you want to, you can give me access to your project through I am an admin, and then you go to, I think it's identity, or maybe it's I am, one of these two here. And basically, you can put my email in, support@getivan.com, and you can give me access to your project, and then I can come in and I can build stuff for you if you really want that done. And I can make a video like this one here of me doing the whole process on video. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later. Bye-bye.